We're going to be looking at melting down some silver today, quite a large quantity of silver, recycling our silver scraps, and for that we're going to be using this electronic furnace. My name's Andrew Berry and welcome to At the Bench's YouTube channel. This film is being suggested by a YouTube subscriber to our channel. I always welcome comments, and if you want me to show you some products or techniques on our YouTube channel, please leave a comment in the description down below and I read every single one. And as a result of that, we're going to be looking at melting down some silver using this electronic furnace. I've had this electronic furnace now for a number of years and I don't use it as often as what I should, and the reason being is that I don't melt down a large quantity of silver in one go. I use the little handheld torches for melting down small quantities and even a sievert torch as well. But when we're looking at melting down 100 grams plus, using these small little torches like this really does become a long-winded affair. And so something like this comes into its elements. This is from a manufacturer called Goldbrunn. It's a German, I think, judging by the name, electronic furnace. You can get various models. This is a Goldbrunn 1000, which means it can melt down 1000 grams of metal in one go. That's a kilo of metal. That is a lot of metal, and they do larger models as well. Now, the advantage you've got with this type of furnace is that it is contained. There are no flames, there's no fumes, there's no borax. When you sprinkle it on the melt, it all comes up and you get covered with, looks like dandruff. It's all self-contained in this unit here. It has an electronic digital temperature gauge down here. We can set the temperature that we need it to. We can put our scrap silver in the graphite crucible, turn it on, come back in half an hour's time. It's reached its temperature, the metal is completely molten, and we can do what we want with that molten metal. Something like this is ideal if you're doing something like lost wax casting, where you've got a large sprue tree and you want to cast it in silver or even in gold. And this will melt it down so much easier than standing there with a torch trying to do it centrifugally, because with this type of furnace you can simply pour it into your vacuum casting machine. But we're not going to be doing anything as technical as that today. We're simply going to be pouring it into an adjustable ingot mold like this. This is a gorgeous one. We've got the round sections on the outside, so we can make round section wire, we can make D-section wire. But today we're going to be pouring it into the slot here, and we're going to be making some sheet that's around about 3 or 4 millimeters thick. We could still use that method by using the torch, whether we're using our Smith's little torch with oxygen and propane, or we can use a nice handheld torch or our sievert torch that I've actually got on the floor by here, but we'll come to that in a moment. But this will heat it up so much easier. There's less fumes, there's less noise, there's less hanging around, because you can just fill the crucible, come back half hour, and it'll all be melted, as I've said. So let me just show you around the machine and show you exactly what the machine is all about. It comes, as I said, self-contained. This is the controller on the front here. We've got the lid that opens up, and in the top of here we've got our graphite crucible. I've used this quite a few times. It's only a small little chap like this, and I would keep a crucible for each different type of metal that you're melting down. So in this case, we're going to be using silver. This is my silver crucible that we've used quite a few times. You can buy extra crucibles. I think they're around about £8 here in the UK. What's that? That's about $12, $13 in the US. Brand new crucible like this. And I would always make sure that that would be silver, and this would be perhaps 9-carat yellow gold. Don't sort of use the same crucible for 9-carat or 18-carat or different color metals, because sometimes there may be a little bit of metal stuck in the bottom. You don't want to contaminate and lower the quality of the gold that you're using. But in this case, we're not going to be using one of these. We're going to be using one of these, which is nice and old, and I've used this quite a few times. It's got, I'll show you on this one actually, and we have the groove running along the top of the crucible, and we have the crucible tongs, and that simply locates in to the groove that enables us to come along and lift this out of the furnace quite nicely to enable us to tip that nice and safely into the adjustable ingot mold that we're going to be using today. And we've also got a little pouring spout on the edge as well that enables the metal to come out and we can direct it where we want it to go. Nice new one, but we're not going to be using this one today. Keep hold of these nice and safe. They are graphite, they are very delicate. You tap this accidentally, you drop it in your tray or on the floor, it will smash. So take really good care of these graphite crucibles. What comes with the kit? Basically, the melting furnace comes as it is. It also comes with a pair of crucible tongs, which I've just shown you. It also comes then with the electric lead as well. As I said, this is a German model, and I had this from Germany, and it came with the German European plug. So I've had to use an adapter upon here, but it has this normal kettle style lead on the end, so I don't use this. I have a normal 3-pin plug for the UK, but anything that has this kettle lead on the end would be fine for your country. It's a dual voltage, so it'll take 110 volts or even 230 volts. It also comes with the crucible in it as well. So today we're going to be looking at melting some scrap silver down. I've got lots of bits and pieces here on my desk, and we've got a bit of chain here. We've got some castings that we carried out when we did some cuttlefish, and we also did some lost wax castings. So this is sterling silver. We've also got some silver here of odds and sods that we've been cutting out. Make sure that you do have clean metal. Make sure that you do remove all the plastic and all the paper off the pieces. Make sure that you don't have too much, or in fact, make sure you don't have any solder on these pieces as well. I know I'm a fine one to talk because in this chain we've got some solder, but I've actually got mixed up among here some fine casting grain that we're going to be incorporating. And whenever you start to melt some silver down, in this case, it's always good to add some nice new casting grain to some old. So you can recycle your recycled silver, and that's got to be good for the environment. Plus then it's also cheaper for you to recycle your own, and you can turn it into whatever state of metal that you want, whether you're going to turn it into sheet or rod or wire and so forth. So we got lots of bits and pieces here. This is all now nice and clean. So first of all, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we have our ingot mold in place. We're doing it on our bench here, and just going to move that to one side in a second. So we're going to need an ingot mold, and we're going to need a means of heating that ingot mold as well, because if you pour 1000 degrees silver, in this case, into a cold mold, the thermal shock will cause that silver to explode. And what you want to do is make sure that that mold is nicely warmed up, not necessarily glowing bright red, but take the chill off it. That's what we've got our sievert torch for, just to warm that up. And of course, if you were doing this in a small little crucible like this, the usual way, well, there will be no need then to have anything like this, because when you're melting it down in a little crucible here, you can melt about 2 ounces perhaps. The flame could be on the crucible, onto the ingot mold, to make sure that's nice and warm. But because we haven't got our little handheld torch with our little crucible, we'll need a means of heating up the ingot mold. Also, we need a little safe area, because when we pour the silver into the ingot mold, there may be a chance of that silver perhaps spilling over the ingot mold, or perhaps we may have too much silver for the ingot mold and it may sort of go over that and fall over onto our bench. So I've got by the side of me a nice soldering station that we're going to put the ingot mold. This can happily stay on the bench. This can be plugged into the mains. This is around about 1.5 kilowatt, which is just basically what a kettle would draw from electric supply. I'll also show you how to set up the timer here as well. Now, the one thing that you must remember is that you can look up on the internet, and you may have books showing you at what point this case silver melts at, and it's just, I think it's at 970 degrees centigrade, in that sort of region. But what you don't want to do is to have it to exactly that temperature, because as soon as you start to take the crucible out of the furnace here, it'll start to cool down. And if that is just exactly when silver melts, 5, 6, 10, 20 degrees less than that and the silver will start to solidify. So you need to make sure that the furnace is higher, the temperature is higher than the melting point of the silver, and that is called superheat. So how much do we need to increase it? Silver melted around about 960, 970 centigrade. We need to add on a good 50, 60, perhaps even 100 degrees more than that to make sure the metal is above its melting point. So the moment we take it out, it starts to cool, but it hasn't cooled down enough for it to solidify. And when we pour it, we can still pour it in a molten state, which is very, very important. You can do silver, you can do gold, you can do aluminium, you can do copper, but make sure you have a separate crucible for each metal. Don't cross over the crucibles for the different metals. Okay, let's all get this sorted out and I'll show you how we're going to set up our timer. So first of all, we turn it on. And our display shows here it's 19 degrees and it's up to 990 is the temperature that this machine is set at. The machines do have a maximum heat that the machine will get up to. This is 1100 degrees. The more times you take this up to 1100 degrees, you really do shorten the heating element life. So never take it up to the maximum. Always keep it down below that, just to make sure that you keep the heating element within its limits. Okay, so we can see it's heating up really quickly. It's up to 30 degrees, 31 degrees already. So let me just show you how we can set the temperature. You press the set button down here, and then the lights down here in green start to flash. You can move that left and right by using this left arrow here. And then you can use the up and down here to alter the digits. And this is the temperature that we are going to set the machine at. As I said, silver melts around 960, 970 degrees centigrade. And this is on 990. I really want to take this a little bit higher. So we're just going to increase this to 1050, I think. So let's just move this around and take that down to 1050. Press set again, and that now is our temperature that is set. It's 66 degrees already, so let's put our silver into the crucible. Take care, you don't want to get a big lump like this and simply drop it into the crucible. You're likely to crack it and the bottom is likely to drop out of the crucible. So what I would always do is pick up the crucible and always get a habit of picking up the crucible within some tongs in case it is quite warm. And what I would do is get the piece of silver and just put it into the crucible and just let it slide down inside the crucible itself. So never hold it upright and never drop things into the crucible. You're likely to break the bottom or crack the crucible. I've got a large piece here. Let's just put that in and slide that in. And likewise with all the other little bits of silver that we've got here, put all this in. I got the fine silver little balls going in as well. There we go, and just throw the rest in, well, like that. I've also got this little bit of chain I shall put in there as well. The chain has oxidized, but I'm not really concerned about that. Put it in. That's what we've got. Let's put it back into the furnace. As I said, it's got a lip on the crucible. Always make sure that lip is in the position so when you take it out to the crucible, you pour it and it will pour along that lip. I'm just going to move that around so it's on my left hand side like that. So that's looking good. Close that down. As you can see, we are already up to 217, 220 degrees already. So it really does heat up very, very fast. The one other thing that I would say that you need is a graphite rod as well. This is to stir up the silver. Really, you don't need this, because as the silver melts, the thermal action of it heating up will sort of circulate through the metal and the metal will move. If you do use the graphite rod just to give it a bit of a stir, you must remember that this is a fantastic conductor of heat, and by putting it into the melt, it's going to lower the heat of that melting metal drastically. So you have to allow for that. You can't simply lift the lid, put the graphite rod in, stir it, and then pour the molten metal, because this will drop the temperature of that molten metal. So when we come to pour, make sure the molten metal is nice and stirred with the graphite rod, put the lid back on and wait a little bit longer for that temperature to come back up to what it should be. So whilst that is heating up, you won't be needing borax either. Usually you use borax when you're melting it down within a crucible, because this helps with the flow of the silver. But because we've got this in a graphite crucible, it has a reduced sort of air within that as well. It protects the silver, and that will aid the silver when it comes to melting down. It'll be poured out nice and easily. Let's just remove some of the rubbish off my desk, and let's just bring into play the little area that I've got that's going to keep our bench nice and clean and also keep us nice and safe. So within this area, these are made of some insulation boards, some solderite boards that I've cut up and made up a nice double thick base, lovely and thick. This little area is all protected. I've got a lip on the front, and that stops any metal coming down into the tray as well. So we're going to need some gloves as well. Perhaps you may have some leather gardening gloves, something like that. These are proper furnace melting down gloves that we've got. Make sure now that you have enough space. Position the mold to the one side and practice. Get your tongs and just practice. Bring that other little graphite mold into place. So practice. You're going to pick this up. The little pouring spout is going to be on the left. We're going to pick that up, so forth, and we're going to come along, and then we're going to pour it. There's not much point having the mold right up this area here, and you can't actually get the crucible in place. So think about how you're going to pour out the molten metal, and that'll be poured out really nicely. Plenty of space around me. Okay. So that's basically all that we need. I'm just going to put an apron on, some eye protection on as well. I've also got my gloves to protect me. We're up to 425 degrees already, heating up nicely. But what you must remember is that even though in red here it'll come up to 1050 or perhaps 1055, it still isn't quite right. You have to make sure that the temperature of that silver comes up to the temperature that you've got on the bottom here. So when this red temperature, actual temperature, comes up to 1050, don't even think about pouring it. Wait a few more minutes for it to get to that temperature. Remember, the center of that silver has to be completely molten. This is the temperature of the element. There's a little sensor within the main chamber. So even though that sensor may say 1050, it does not necessarily mean at that particular moment in time that the crucible and the molten silver is that temperature. Always wait that little bit further. So nearly up to 500 degrees, we're nearly halfway there. I'm just going to stop the camera and restart it once I've washed my hands and donned my apron and safety glasses. Okay, the temperature is coming up to 1050. It's up to 1046, so we're pretty much there. It's been there for about 5 minutes. It's virtually up to where it should be. Now, when we look in the top, we can see the crucible is bright red. We're going to just use this to stir the silver, make sure it's nice and molten. I'm not really looking down on top. This is quite high, and the heat coming up from there is quite intense. So a little bit of stirring, put it back. We've reduced the temperature of that metal by quite a bit, even though down here on the display it still says basically a degree out. That's the temperature of the sensor, not the metal. So we need to wait for that metal to come back up to temperature. In the meantime, we need to draw our attention now to the ingot mold and make sure that ingot mold now is nice and warm. We're going to use our sievert torch now to warm this up. It's just to take the chill off the mold so there is no shock when the molten metal hits the metal ingot mold. So we're just going to warm this up for a few moments. That's going to allow the temperature of the metal to come back up. I've got my safety glasses here. Let's put those on now so I don't forget. We've lined the ingot mold with a little bit of oil as well. That's going to be burnt off, and that's going to leave a layer of carbon on the surface, which is really important. If you have an ingot mold and it's brand new, make sure you warm it up. You put some oil on the surfaces where the metal is going to be. That'll protect the surfaces. That will ensure the metal, the molten metal, won't stick to the ingot mold. So you can see we've got a little bit of smoke coming from the top of the mold. So that mold now is nice and warm. You can see it actually smoking. Let's put our gloves on. We're ready now to pour our molten silver into our mold. You see it's very, very hot, and in one fell swoop there we go. Return the crucible back and close the lid. You can see upon the top here there's a little bit of silver that is left. Looked like a little bit solidified when it came out of the crucible. Remember, the silver won't pour like water. It likes to cling on to itself. So you have to pour it, I'd say, just slightly more than horizontal to get the silver to initially flow. Don't pour it in one fell swoop. You're going to make a complete mess. So there we go, a nice successful pour. Wait for that to cool down a little bit. Excuse the smoke coming off it at the moment. When that has cooled down a little bit, we'll see how successful it is. Undo the clamp here, open up the mold so we can then see how that piece of silver looks, and fingers crossed everything going to plan, that will look absolutely brilliant, and we can use that then in our roller mill, or we can hammer it and shape it, and we can use it in our new products. It's a fantastic way of recycling. Instead of sending your scrap bits and pieces of clean scrap back to the refiners that they will give you literally pennies for, and then you have to then buy your new material, we can make our own in our own little workshops. So give us a few minutes, wait for it to cool down. I'm going to open the mold, and hopefully I'll show you this fantastic ingot. All right then, so a few minutes has gone by. We still got a little bit of smoke coming from this. I'm going to keep these gloves on because I know this is going to be still pretty hot. Let's just undo the clamp, lift the clamp up. Put that somewhere safe and open this up. As you can see, we've got a lovely, gorgeous sheet of silver. A little bit of flashings on the bottom, but those can be taken off with a file or with a saw blade. And we've got there, must be a good 70-80 grams of silver that's in a nice shape that we can start to use in our projects. So that's how we safely use our electronic furnace to melt down our silver to make some sheet in this particular instance. Don't forget, please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please give this film a thumbs up if you like it. Don't forget, smash that little bell icon to be notified when films go live on our YouTube channel. I do feel a bit silly with these gloves on. And don't forget, I will see you later on in the next film. Take care. Bye for now. Oh, zippy. That's rainbow. Doesn't matter. Take care. Bye-bye.